Hi, everybody. My name is Tobias. Welcome to Publication Design. Today, I'm going to be starting this class off a little different, just with a pre-recorded video for you guys. It's partly just because I've got a doctor's appointment that might be finished by the time class is supposed to start, but I wanted to make sure that you guys kind of had an easy to follow intro to the class anyway. So just in case my appointment runs a little overtime, because you know how doctor's offices are, I want to make sure this was ready for you, and then I'll be hopping into Microsoft Teams to get started. So I'll be putting the link on the My Campus homepage for you guys to get started. And I'll just go over the introduction to the course here. As well, just as an update for everyone, I am not going to be continuing to work with VCAD this semester. So you're going to be getting a new instructor as of next week. So I'm just introducing the course. There may be some things that I do differently, but I think for the most part, anyone who's going to be picking this up should be able to continue on. But links to things like the Google Drive folder and stuff, anything that you do with Google Drive, that won't change. You still own your Google Drive files. And I would recommend you keep doing the Google Drive. Not every instructor is going to recommend that. But that's kind of a key thing that I change a little bit. I've taught this course quite a few times. And, my professional publication work, when I work with writers and content developers, all kinds of different people in the publishing space, Google Drive really is the tool that we use for organizing and collaborating on content. So I like to introduce that as part of this course because it is a really big part of the real world publication world, which graphic designers do often need to learn to work with. So we're just going to go through the first assignment, and really it's going to be, assignment 1 and 2 are kind of related. So partly what we're doing is we're developing a content plan for your publication. For the publication design, it says you're design a new magazine, and which will also be produced as an interactive PDF file, creating style guides, all that layout. So there's going to be some things that I'll go through, which you can work on today, and I'll review with you guys in the Microsoft Teams session as well to give you some feedback and hopefully get you guys started on the right track for getting this project done quickly, efficiently, and enjoyably. So the first thing that I'm going to say is, in the past, what I have done is if people, everybody's got your own different interests, and you do want to look to use this course to build your portfolio. And a lot of people, you may have some illustration skills or want to show off some illustration skills or highlight your illustration work. This can be a good place to do that if you're interested perhaps in doing a children's book. So in the past, there have been some students who were really interested in writing a children's book and doing the illustrations for it. I've accepted that as a project in the past. I do work with children's book authors to help them get their books publication ready. I can't guarantee if the new instructor will have experience with that. So as much as initially that is something I would do, ask your instructor if that's something they can help you out with. Otherwise, you may be required to do a magazine. So as part of your intro planning work, just kind of, sure, if you're thinking of doing a children's book, pitch it to your new instructor, ask them, but do have a magazine concept as a fallback because that is sort of the core requirement of this course. Similarly, if you're a photographer, a photo-based book is something that I've also accepted. It's quite a bit of content development in both cases. What's different with those two projects, a photo book or a children's book, is that the typographic component, type layout part, is a little less demanding. But I think that there's still plenty of good things you can learn about grid design and paragraph styles, all the stuff that you need. And, technically speaking, books are part of the publishing world. So there's common skills that will need to be worked there. Again, if you were thinking of doing a photo book and you're interested in photography, think about that in a magazine format. There's plenty of magazines that are kind of photo essay based. And if you do feel like using your photographic skills as part of your content, pitch that as well. But I would recommend, if you're thinking of doing that, do focus on the magazine format. Okay, so kind of the assignment one, which is really just planning out the magazine topic and your theme, developing a name, coming up from some ideas, and a general guideline, a single page. This is essentially a design summary. And they've given you a template here, and it's a pretty good template. What's the name? What's your concept? List them out as bullet points here. Explain what the main theme and topic and focus is going to be for your publication. And then what's it going to be kind of about? And it says article 1 and 2 here. It's a really good exercise to go through the process of writing at least a couple of articles. Generally, your average magazine article is somewhere between 1,500 words, sometimes as short as 1,000, even less, sometimes it's just more of a photo essay type of content. So again, the types of articles you develop as you work through the next couple of stages, that'll be something that your new instructor will really help you guide with. But for this first part of the assignment, it's just choosing a topic. I'm going to do an article about this related to my magazine's main topic, and another one. In the past, I've also suggested people do more than just 2 articles. 2 articles can be a little bit of a little bit limiting, and some people want to cover a lot more. So just if you do plan for more like 4 articles, that can often give you just a lot more to work with and really explore your style guides. But 2 is a minimum, and I think that would be good. This whole thing about images, presenting existing images, supporting material, explain how and when you're planning the photo shoot. You might not be planning a photo shoot. You might want to work with royalty-free stock photography. And that's a really common thing to do in the real magazine publishing world when we're pitching ideas. We might not actually have our photography organized, so we will use royalty-free stock photography and we'll cite the source and say, this is placement only stock photo. And it's just set for a style and a theme. So do feel free to go to stock.adobe.com. You can use just the low resolution preview images, but those can't be used for your finished production. You would need to actually license the royalty-free images or take similar images with your camera or a friend who's a photographer or something, which could be a fair bit of work. So definitely plan that ahead. Talk to your instructor about potentially just using the licensed version of your royalty-free images. You can generally get access to Adobe Stock for kind of a one-time thing, like 30 images for $30 or something, which is generally worth it. I personally will license. I have a really large stock photo library, and in the past I've let students use those for their student work. But the main thing is, if you use stock photo, be absolutely sure to cite that source in your layout, because you don't want your portfolio to show work and make it look like maybe you created those photos. Most art directors, when they're looking at portfolios, they can tell when something is stock, but not always. Other places you can go for images that are royalty free is a website called pexels.com. Okay, this is a professional kind of showcase site where professional and amateur photographers submit all kinds of their work free of license. So you can use images like this, but again, it's the same thing. You need to make sure that you cite your source if you use any image that you find on Pexels in your student work. But what's really great about it is much better. It's much more unique than stock, and there's just a huge range of stuff, and it's almost kind of a good way to give a little bit of a shout out to, emerging photographers or photographers who are trying to get their names known. So it's a great website for student work. Again, just make sure that you cite your sources. Make sure it's really clear if you didn't create the photography that it's what you use. But Pexels.com is a great place to go. We use it all the time for mock-up work. All right. So the last bit here, this whole target audiences chart. Now this is something that I generally will, and we'll discuss this quite a bit during the first course session, is when we plan out a target audience. This stuff here, age, gender, household income, education, marital status, those are very, very basic market demos. We call them market demos, which are more used for the advertising sales department of a magazine or a publication. That's generally why we care about that information. It doesn't really affect what we do from a creative director's perspective. So as an art director or a creative director being brought in to work on a new magazine design, which is essentially what this course is all about, we're not so concerned by age, gender, household income, education, or marital status, because those things really don't impact how we design the magazine at all. They might have a very minor impact on things like type size if you're dealing with like senior citizens or something like that. But for the most part, what we more care about is lifestyle, interests, values, aspirations, those things. Age group can really fit that, right? You know, you're not necessarily, like, let's just say your topic was video games. It's an assumption that video games are for young people. However, there's all kinds of age groups who play video games, and that can be an interesting niche market, right? So video games for, let's say, dads between the age of 30 and 50, you know, because that's actually a pretty big segment of the gaming market, because a lot of people my age grew up with video games and never stopped playing them, and we've got kids now, and we're not necessarily into the video games for the same reasons that our kids are, but I might be interested in reading a magazine by that. So that is where age group is kind of important, because it would focus on your topic and your tone and your style. So do think about the age group, and to some degree gender, for sure. It really depends on the topic. You got to be careful of stereotypes, right? Who knows? You want to do a magazine about flower arrangement? Who's to say that men aren't into flower arrangement, right? So again, this is where lifestyles and interests are actually more important. So put a lot more time thinking about that. Don't just fill out this table and just say, yeah, it's going to be for men 40 to 50, make over $100,000 a year, who have graduated from college and are married. That's not actually going to give you very much useful information to create a meaningful concept for a magazine. But do think about lifestyle interests, activities. What type of music do you think they would listen to? What sort of social events would they go to? What sort of concerts would they attend? All these sorts of things can help draw a better picture for you, and are just going to help you better with your creative brief. Most of the time, that's exactly what this is. This is a creative brief. Generally, when working in publication, you would receive a fairly detailed breakdown from a communications director who is, sorry, my kids are in the background making noise. You would receive a creative brief from a communications director or an editor who's like, this is our magazine concept. We want you to develop a look and feel and a style guide for the concept. Of course, you don't have that here. And I think it's a good exercise to go through and develop it for yourself. It'll allow you to pick a topic that you're interested in or passionate about, and it'll just make the overall course a lot more exciting and enjoyable for you, because it really is quite a bit of fun. You know, this course will end up covering a lot of technical things about how to work with Adobe InDesign, which is the main tool that we use in the publication world these days and probably for the foreseeable future. Some of us are kind of secretly hoping for its demise, but it seems pretty well entrenched, so I don't think Adobe InDesign is going anywhere. Okay, so let's dive into how to use Google Drive to do this. You know, this templates have been given to you as PDF files from the My Campus page, but they're not that easy to work with. But Google Drive is really nice and easy to work with. I think you guys have a couple other classes with me, so you should be aware of that. So what I'd recommend you do is, in this folder, which is linked from the course homepage, go in there, make yourself a folder. I can see Kylie's already done that. But make yourself a folder with your name and student number. And then in that folder, make subfolders, and then we're just going to go assignment 1, planning content, and go new, Google Doc, blank document. That's that create and share button, which just says anyone who has access to the sharing options in the folder will be able to also see this file. So if you're not familiar with a Google Doc, it's kind of like a Word doc that you can just edit in a browser, but the nice thing about it is that you can share it. We can all take a look at it, comment on it in real time. This is why it's really the expected platform that writers, content managers, and developers are all using these days. We still get a whole bunch of stuff from writers in Microsoft Word format. We make fun of them and tell them to join the 21st century because the key thing about publication work is the immediacy of the feedback process. Commenting, editing, and all that stuff, and version control. So that's what's really great about Google Docs. So I'm just going to say assignment 1, publication plan. From there, if you want, you can just cut and paste the type out of the template. That's fine. All right, so that's just going to go there. So you're just going to get plain text that's kind of unformatted like this. You could go into this actual document. You guys will have access to this in my folder. Feel free to go ahead and make a copy for yourself if you want, but go through the exercise of making your own. Okay. Okay, so Inspiration Magazine. So what I would do, let's just do formatting here first before we go. So this is the title. So just use the formatting here, title. Okay. We'll call this heading 1. We'll get into more about what this heading 1, heading 2 thing is all about. But one of the other reasons that Google Docs is being really well embraced by the publication world, especially in news media and stuff like that, is because they force this heading and title structure. So these are actually kind of industry-wide tags that we use to establish hierarchy and structure in a document. So it helps a bunch of things. It helps the designer know what the title is and what the subsections and titles are using heading 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4. It also works with HTML in news platform publishing. Those tags are recognized by Google and stuff like that. So it just helps index information better. So that's why it's all here. So do use the title and heading styles here to start organizing things. We'll get into that a little bit more in the style guide, but that's actually going to need to be covered by your new instructor. Inspirational Magazine, bringing a hard copy or include links to an online webpage. I would highly recommend you get a hard copy. It's really, really important to take a look at the layout of magazines, take a look at the font sizes, all those types of stuff. There's quite a bit of difference between what you see in Adobe InDesign on your computer screen and what something actually looks like on a page. Really, when you're developing style guides and things, if you've got access to a printer, I really recommend printing out your style guides. You'll be surprised at how different the typefaces, sizes, all those things look. So bringing in getting yourself on a hand, I'd say 2 or 3 different printed magazines. Take a look at them. There's going to be all kinds of aspects in there in terms of layout, use of grids, margining, all kinds of stuff that your new instructor should hopefully go through with you. Okay, so once you've kind of got your document created here, you can just sort of list out your names, and I'd recommend just kind of bullet pointing them. These can just be, like I was saying, games for dads, gamer dad. I don't know. Old man gamer. That probably wouldn't work very well. But again, you're just roughing out your ideas. Okay. Target audience definition. Just like in corporate design, just like all those things, we're thinking about why would somebody be interested in this publication? What are they into? So again, maybe age and gender, possibly. It really depends on the topic. But once you've defined your basic topic and written it out, then list out, interested in modern video games, but with a nostalgic background as our ideal reader grew up with video games understand games their kids are playing. So again, this is where you just think through who you're talking to, right? Would moms be into this video game? Maybe it's for parents. Maybe it's parent gamer. You know, that could be moms and dads. Again, it's just getting more into defining the story and not so much about the kind of the cold hard facts, which, you know, advertisers really care about that stuff for sure. They also care about interests. They care about audience. So your audience definition is kind of important. I don't think that this project needs to be turned into an in-depth marketing survey. Some of the creative briefs that you'll see in publication are quite detailed, and they're gonna be multi-page documents. I don't think it's necessary for you to develop that and come up with a good idea. Again, for the most part, most people tend to choose a topic that they're personally into, which means you're kind of designing for yourself and something that you'd be interested in, something that you kind of understand that audience because you're part of that audience, and that's perfectly okay. If, like I say, I don't know if the new instructor is going to let you do a children's book, but if you do a children's book, there's a simpler breakdown for children's books. It's essentially first readers. Parents will read this to kids, or first readers or learning readers in terms of the language, and that really comes down to word count. Pacing, all those kinds of things are all considerations in how you design the book, from typeface to illustration style, all the rest of it. So you would need to do a slightly different breakdown of your target audience that way. But target audience definition for children's books is typically quite a bit more simple, right? Because kids are kids, and they essentially across the board their reading level is relatively consistent. Sometimes you will get things like special needs readers, all that sort of stuff, in which case there's generally a doctor involved in the content development process, and they'll often have a much more detailed list of things that you should do in terms of how you should phrase things and all that kind of stuff. It can be kind of interesting, but for the most part, just children's books are pretty fun because they're pretty simple to define the audience. So if you want to do that, just summarize it, run it by the new instructor first, though, because they may require that you do a magazine, which is also perfectly good. Okay, so that's all I would kind of want you to see, and that's for the most part what I'd like you to work on today as part of this first session. It's just planning out your publication, pitching an idea. I'll review your ideas with you guys, give you my feedback, and hopefully that'll help get you on your way to getting going. Okay. So after you've got that done, what are we going to do for assignment? Now, assignment 2, I won't be working with you for assignment 2, but you're going to be developing your articles or sourcing content, okay? Do this with Google Drive. Create a new standalone document in your Drive folder. So that's just your content folder, and just name the Article 1. Let's just title it. Remember to do it. Mine's running a little slow right now. I don't know what the name is, but you can always come back and change this. Okay, so this is where the title subtitle thing is important. So you tag that as your title, then beginner's guide to understanding Overwatch 2, something like that. That would sort of fit within my kind of hypothetical topic here. So that would be like a subtitle. And then often within the title we'll have author credit. So Tobias Crichton, January 11, 2023. Might have an email address. That type of thing, Twitter handles, these types of things. You see these things in publication all the time. often we'll just leave that as part of the writer body copy in terms of the raw formatting. So then this is where you just write your article, okay? So that's just normal text, write your text article. Once that's done, click on the share button, okay? So anyone with the link is an editor in this particular case. You might not want anyone with the link because everyone in the class would have that by default. Just change it to commenter. That means people can't edit. I won't be able to edit your file, but I'll be able to put comments in there. And this is the most common thing that we do, and we're collaborating with groups of people to get their feedback on an article. And similarly, when I'm working with writers or authors, when they're contributing content to a publication, they'll submit it like this, and then I'll give them my content or my comments. Of course, generally I'm just doing the art direction, so a lot of times it'll just be questions with regard to, like, do you have a photo of this topic or whatever, and then the editorial person will put their comments in, please cite sources and links, this type of thing. But that's what the comments are all about. But anyways, you copy your link, and then what you can do between Google Docs, you can actually link between your documents, which is really cool, right? So this is just save time in your plan. So your article 1, you've got that share link. Make sure you've copied the link, and then go here, select what you want to link it to, click the little link icon here. Okay, and then just right click, paste, apply. So it's just gets a nice little shortcut to the preview here. You can do this with image files. You can do all kinds of stuff in Google Docs that way. And it's really handy because it just helps you get everything together. So similarly, if you're going to source your content and you want photos to go with this article, you can link to JPEG files that you've uploaded to Google Drive exactly the same way. And you can even embed those JPEG images just using this embed from Drive or from your photos. It's really nice and handy, or by URL. And let's just use an example here. Okay, let's say I want to use a Pexels image. Let's just take a quick look and just see if there's parents playing video games. Who knows? Maybe it'll be something. Yeah, there you go. Some of this stuff is fairly stock looking, but, look at the topic that I've chosen anyways. But something like this, could kind of work. But let's say I just want to use this image. Okay. So you can see you've got your download options. If you do download, make sure you get the high resolution version, but you could, the larger ones will work, but that's all good. Anyways, you can actually just link right to an image as a preview, and that's just sort of a way for you to come back to it if you want to. So let's say I wanted to use this one. Okay, copy image address. Go back to your document. You can do it like this. You can go insert images by URL. Right click and paste. There you go. However, if you do this, okay, if you just embed the image that way, that's great. That's a nice preview. However, there's no easy way to know where that image came from. You can't really quite, once you've embedded an image in a document, there's no real easy way as the editor to get access to the link, which is a little frustrating because clearly the information is there. But anyways, the intended process here is to add a comment and then also paste the URL that's related to where that image came from into the comment. Then you can always use that to go and get all the information related to that image. So that'd be no different than if you embedded something on your Google Drive from photos. You're going to want to get the URL for it directly right there. So that just is a real time saver. And boy, I can't tell you how many times I've begged and pleaded with authors to do this, but a lot of time in the original editorial process is often spent just hunting down where the heck they found their source image from. But that'll also allow you to, provide photographer information, Artem Portes, wrong image there. But anyways, you can give them a sources cited reference right off this website. So that's kind of why this site exists. It's really good. A lot of photographers, sometimes if we use their work, say, hey, we liked your work on Pexels. We've got an article. We'd like to get you to go and do a photo shoot. It comes down to location availability and stuff like that. But that is quite common, and that's to a large degree why I think Pexels exists, is to introduce designers and art directors to new photographers. It's really great. All right, and then just write your article underneath in your text, whatever that is, you know. Article here, that is about 1,000 words. And if you're worried about word count and stuff, Google Docs does have a word count under tools, so you can just go word count. You know, that's you can actually do a word count while typing. It's of course going to include your titles and all that kind of stuff, but generally most of the time we care about is word, not characters. Okay, so I've selected 7, but there's 25 words in total. So you can, if you want to get a count of what just your article word count is, just select it and go tools, word count. Okay, so that's essentially the first 2 things. I'm going to add a little bit more to this intro video, even though it's not the stuff that I'm going to be covering with you. I really want to make sure that the instructor who picks this up continues on with this, because this is of critical importance in publication work. So if you've used InDesign before, you might just be used to creating new documents, but you'll notice right underneath new, there's this thing called book. All right. So a book is just a collection of documents, but it's more than that. It's a synchronization tool that allows you to have multiple InDesign files and synchronize your style guides between those files, because a single document starts to get pretty chunky after somewhere around 32 to 40 pages. It really depends on how much memory your computer has or whatever. But it's also not the most efficient way to organize a document, because one of the things that happens in publishing all the time is we move articles around. We move the order of articles from, the end to the beginning, or maybe an article changes and a whole bunch of new editorial copy comes in. We don't have enough space in our layout. You see this kind of thing in long read magazines like National Geographic or Vanity Fair or whatever. So often you'll kind of get the nice design and laid out part of the article, and it's the first 2,000 words or whatever, and then they say continued on page 187, where it just picks up and runs on. Using multiple InDesign documents is key for managing that sort of thing. If you had to try and do a whole magazine in one single InDesign document, you'd tear your hair out, because it's much harder to reorganize stuff. So to get started, what you're going to do is you're going to just create a new book. Okay. And you're going to just pick where to save it. So in your local file structure, this is how I highly recommend you organize things. Make a folder for publication design, and then make yourself a folder called concept development. I don't know why it didn't give me the option to name it there first, but we'll just call that concept development. So the reason I make a folder called concept development is, especially in publication work, there's the file you're working on, which is the current version, and then there's the files that went out to press. Once those files go out to print, to the print shop, the super common thing that happens is revisions come in. That is really, really common. You do not want to mix up your revisions with your press files, because if you do, you might miss stuff, and that's just a huge no-no. So we keep our working file set separate from our press file set. So I make a concept development folder. Some people make a folder called working files, press files, whatever. I just call it concept development. Makes sense. But you can, as long as it makes sense to you and ideally to other people. Okay, so my magazine concept, whatever that is, let's say I do decide to call this gaming parents. I don't know. So we'll just call this Gaming Parents issue 1. Okay, so that's a pretty typical thing, if it's going to be a periodical or whatever, or sometimes it's just issue 1 concept, whatever. But most of your concept work isn't really going to be in the INDB file. That's what this book file is here. Okay, most of your stuff, your actual revisions and stuff, are going to be in your InDesign files, which you link to your InDesign book. So you hit save. And all you're going to get is this palette here. Doesn't look like much, but it's kind of like a file. But then we're going to make a new document. Okay, so I'm just going to call this first document cover section. All right. Actually, most of the time we would do this as the front cover section, but most of the time we just call it cover section. And because I haven't really done any creative work yet, I'm just going to call it my draft copy. All right, we're going to make multiple versions of this as we start to make changes. Anyways, cover section draft. Okay, so 8.5 by 11. This is not really actually the most common magazine format. There's a lot of different magazine sizes out there. 8.5 by 11 is used. It's not used very often. Oh shoot, I forgot to bring down my. Okay, I've got a couple of press. I'll just. It's not going to be a magazine, unfortunately. I did have two different types of magazines put aside to show you the two different bind set types, but that's kind of an important consideration when you're doing your initial setup. Let me just grab. What have I got here? Okay, I have a couple of publications that I work on fairly regularly. So these are relatively good examples. So when you see a publication that looks like this, okay, it's got no spine down there. It's kind of stapled and it's opened up. It's called a saddle stitch publication. Okay, so what that is it's, in this particular case, it's just a bunch of flat sheets. You know, this is for an annual report, but same thing for magazines. Here's another pretty common magazine you'll see, Savor magazine here in Calgary. It's also a saddle stitch publication, so two staples. So what a saddle stitch is, or sometimes it's called a self-cover saddle stitch, is just a big sheet of paper. So this one here, this is sort of a large, this is what is sometimes referred to as a tabloid or editorial tabloid format. There's all kinds of different ways in the publication space, especially in magazines, in terms of how they measure things out, and it's based on columns and rules and rows. But we can just keep it simple and just use inches, even though this is Canada and we do generally use a metric system. Not in publication work, just because of the dominance, I'm guessing, of American print shops and stuff in publication. We do tend to use imperial measurement for our trim sizes. So that's what the flat size is. So I'm pretty sure this is a 12 by 19. I'll just grab my handy dandy publication rule from over here. This is old of the hills, but it hasn't changed in years. Yeah, so it's a 10.5 by 13.25. So if you want to do like a larger format like that, that'd be pretty common. So I'm going to do a 10.5 by 13.25. I forget what that's called off the top of my head, but doesn't matter. Okay, so things like margins and all the rest of it, I wouldn't really worry about that here. We'll do that in our actual document setup. And I'm sure, as you guys hopefully know from your electronic design class, hopefully you're kind of familiar with editing your basic layout and templates. If you're not, make sure you ask your new instructor to go over that again. Totally understandable that you might be a little rusty with that. But the key thing is you want to do select facing pages, because we're always working with facing pages, and we're always working in page sets of 4. Okay, and the reason for that is each set of pages is really one sheet of paper folded in half when we're doing self-cover saddle stitch, and that's why it's always facing pages, and it's always 4. You fold a piece of paper in half, you get 4 pages. So you can't have less. You can't have 2 pages. You can't have a 2-page section. You can have 4. You can have what's called a spread, and that is 2 pages for sure, but just bear in mind that it's different sides of a single sheet of paper, and that's what we're seeing once we create a page set in Adobe InDesign. Okay, so I left my slug area open, which is, oops, I forgot to set up my bleeds, but okay, so if you haven't been introduced to what the slug area is, okay, so let's just go back to my document setup here. Okay, so the slug is the area outside of the bleed. In most print area, most magazine publications, you want a bleed, so that's about 1/8 of an inch sometimes up to a quarter, but an eighth is pretty common. So the slug area is information that we put outside of the trim area, and that's to tell the press people additional information, you know, who the publisher is, maybe who the design production person is, this sort of thing. I'm not going to say that you guys really need the slug. You can set that to 0. But that's what it's there for, and I'll just demo it just for the point of seeing it, but let's unlink it. Pretty common is just to leave the slug area on the right-hand side of the spread, but that can kind of get in the way, so a lot of times you kind of want to put that on the bottom. So we'll just give ourselves 2 inches there. So if you include a slug area, it's just this blue box area. And so when we send our press files out, if we've got additional information that we want the press shop to know, we'll put that information here. It's just not going to be included in the final trim size, but it just includes it in the PDF. I'm just going to say don't worry about the slug in your file settings. It's not that important. Okay, so the main thing that we care about here is we've got our page set. So if you do facing pages, you've got your cover. Okay, so this page here is your front cover. This page, if you imagine, this is kind of showing a flat piece of paper, but showing the 4 pages. This is what's called the inside spread, or inside front cover spread in this particular case. So this would be front of the piece of paper. This would be whatever is directly on the back. If you folded the paper in half, it's inside front cover. And then this here is technically page 1, right? And then this is the page 2, which would be the next page 2. So if you want to kind of fix get your numbering to make sense right away, this is where you start numbering and page section options. Okay, so start a section, automatic page numbering at 1. Okay, and you can include section prefixes. You want to get funky, you can change the styles, all sort of stuff like this. This, you know, the next instructor will get into how to automate your page numbering. We don't do that manually, but also it's going to become important when you're doing something like a table of contents. We also don't need to manually do that in InDesign. Your table of contents can be automated, and that can essentially make the interactive part of the PDF, even though it's very uncommonly used these days. When we talk about a magazine publication going interactive, we mean it goes into the website as an AMP article. It's very, very rare that interactive PDFs are distributed anymore. It was kind of back before the internet had a publishing standard. So yeah, limited interactive PDF. I do still do that a little bit, but it's pretty basic. It's just like a link to a section, table of contents. And I'm sure your next instructor will feel the same. Okay. So there, that page starts right there. So now this is page 1 and 2. So, you know, your cover section technically has a number, right? But that's just, we don't necessarily put a page number on a cover or an inside front cover. And we might not even start it in our first whole cover section. This is often just ad space, right? But you might want to put your table of contents or letter from the editor or introduction to the magazine. That would essentially go on the right-hand side of your inside front cover spread at the earliest point. Okay, so then you hit save. So you've made your cover section. We're not doing any styling work here. We're just roughing out our structure. Let's put this in the actual project folder. Okay, cover section 1, INDD. There you go, it's saved. Okay, so once we've saved our InDesign file, now we're going to add it to our book. So just go to your book palette, click the plus. Go back to your folder. It'd be nice if InDesign remembered what the last folder was you went to, but it doesn't. This is why knowing where your files are is really important. Cover section draft, open, there you go. So now if you close this InDesign document, it's still accessible from your book, okay? You can just double click on it to open up that section of the book. So you can see as you build out your magazine, as long as you name your sections really clear, you can work throughout your whole book without having to load the whole thing up again. It's not going to really be a big deal in a small sort of student publication, but in the real world, when we're doing a couple hundred pages in a bigger magazine, you don't want to be opening up the whole thing every time. It slows things down. It's kind of crazy. So this is where we want to talk a little bit about page count and planning for your page count. So because of the whole requirement for a saddle stitch, we're designing for self-cover saddle stitch, it means that the page count always has to be a multiple of 4. You can't have a number that doesn't divide evenly by 4 because your page count won't work out in a saddle stitch situation. So you're going to want to make sure that as you plan your book out, your page count always adds up to a multiple of 4. So I'm going to say, for a student project, 24 pages, including the cover section, probably is going to give you a lot of opportunity to really work with your style guides. Do lots of photo spread layouts, get all your copy in there, all the rest of it. So page count, ultimately that'll come down to each instructor in terms of what they think is enough for you to really work with your different grid styles and all the rest of it. I'm going to say probably a minimum of 24 pages. Anyways, thing about page counts that you guys should know is that when it comes to saddle stitch, there's kind of a maximum number of pages you can do in a single saddle stitch set. And it depends on how thick the paper is. But it's not very many. It's typically somewhere between 32, maybe even sometimes up to like 48 pages. But that's about it. After that, you need multiple saddle stitch sets, which are then all glued into a cover separately, and that's called a perfect bind. So perfect bind is like a stack of saddle stitch books, and something like National Geographic or whatever, it's always over 100 pages easy. They're going to have multiple saddle stitch sets, and that's what's called a perfect bind book. And again, the reason we use the InDesign book set is so that we can separate out a book for perfect binding. It's much easier for the print company to work with a design file that's been created like a book, because then they can choose each section, print it out separately, adjust their pages to fit whatever they need to do for what's called pagination. And if you just give them a big InDesign file, they will not be happy with you. In fact, they won't even accept it most of the time, or they'll just make you do all the pagination work. That's the thing you really don't want to be doing as a designer, is doing the press setup for a print company, because a lot of times they are not they don't have any time, so it can be really high stress. So if you ever do get into publication work, definitely use the book format. That is really key. So I'm just going to do one more. We're just going to make a duplicate of this file. We're just going to do a save as, and I'm just going to call this article 1, and it's a draft as well. Okay, so there we go. It's essentially a duplicate of the file. But I'm just going to go add my article 1, open. There you go. You can see it's in there. Okay, so once you've gotten your files added, that's pretty much all you need to do. You want to just save your file set, save. Okay, and we're going to save our book. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So the next thing that you are going to be doing is we're going to be using our book to publish work in progress as we go. As you work on your cover design or whatever, you're adding your layouts and your masthead and your cover and all that sort of fun stuff. You're going to be adding it to a book, but getting the initial structure set up like this is a nice time saver, and it just allows you to do quick in progress publishing. So I'm going to want you to use InDesign as part of session 1 to get a book created and add at least 2 documents, just like I demonstrated here. Then the next thing that you're going to do is we're going to use we're going to go export book to PDF. Okay, now there's other things that we're going to be doing here too. Packaging a book for print. We're going to be doing that pretty regularly as well, because a lot of times you're going to need to upload your InDesign file so that you can submit the actual InDesign file set to your instructor so that they can help you with working on the styling or what have you. But for quick preview purposes, we export a book to a PDF. So we just hit export book to PDF. You got to choose your folder where you're working there, because again, InDesign just doesn't remember where your file, where the last location was you used. Go to your wherever you're saving your folder, and I'm just going to issue one. Okay, draft. So it's going to create a PDF. It's going to take all your linked stuff and it's going to create a PDF document. We're going to hit save. It's going to ask us for some PDF publish options. Okay. So you're going to go, typically we want to publish as spreads, so make sure you click spreads. The view and all that stuff doesn't matter too much. Go down to your general, embed page thumbnails. That should all be fine. Yeah, that's all you got to do. Hit export. Oh, not export to interactive PDF. What did I do here? I think last time I did a publication, I actually did a export to interactive. So export book to PDF, and I need to make sure I don't choose PDF interactive. Right. Make sure you select Adobe PDF print. Getting ahead of myself there. Publishing to interactive, that's what your instructor will go through with you as a sort of next step. There's two different types of PDF that you create. Do the print version. So spreads, and then we're going to go to marks and bleeds. We want, at a minimum, we want the crop marks. Sometimes you can just say all printers marks, but for preview purposes, this just helps us know that there's a bleed built in, so that's good. And then just say use the document bleed settings. Okay, that's all that really matters, so that it actually includes the blood. And this is where include slug area. If you wanted that footer area and below, you would click that. So for publication work, we generally do include the slug. I'm not going to say it's required for this class though. Okay, so the output settings, there's all kinds of different preview, post, things like this. This ink manager becomes relatively important. If you've gone through and you've used some Pantone spot colors, which is perfectly fine, that's really common. A lot of times we can't actually print those, so this is where we would select convert all spots to process, but I haven't set any spot color inks up yet. That'll be part of your masthead design or whatever. But for the most part, we're generally converting our spot colors to CMYK process printing. Some publications you can actually print a Pantone color or two. If you ever see a magazine, it's got a really bright, vibrant pink or an orange or whatever, that's guaranteed a spot color. It doesn't you can't print that stuff in PDF. So your new instructor will certainly go through spot colors in your masthead design and how to use spot colors in your covers and all that sort of stuff, because that's how we get those nice, vibrant, intense colors on the magazine shelf. But for now, we're just not going to worry about our export. That's all good. Hit export. And there you go. There's your nice. I'll just bring that Acrobat Reader over to this monitor here. So it's just blank, right? But you can now see my first spread. That's what this little mark here means, is the page fold. The area under here, this white blank area. But what fits into this in between these trim marks, that's the trim. So once you've got your layout with your bleeds and everything, they'll all show up here. But anyways, for just showing that you've got that together, that's your basic preview PDF. You can then just drag and drop that up to your Google Drive folder. I think I might have accidentally closed my, oh no, here it is. Okay, so I'll just put that, we can put that in our content development. I mean, assignment 3 is sort of layout and design, but I would just put it right into the project folder. So you just, here's my local drive in my concept development folder, Gaming Parents Issue 1. Upload that. My computer's a little cranky when it comes to actually. Oh, I did. Anyways, cancel. It uploaded instantly. Normally I'm used to seeing a preview there, but of course the file's tiny, 14 kilobytes. So now you can just preview it nicely in Google Drive just by double clicking on it. So the reason we use this process in publication work is that there's a commenting tool, so we can real-time comment, type in your comment on design or layout elements. So this is just a really, really efficient and quick way to gather feedback from multiple people, get your revisions done, and then you upload those things. So I'm going to quickly go through what revisioning looks like. So that was my issue 1 PDF. Let's say I go back, I'm like, okay, I got a bunch of feedback. Let's just make a little change here. So I'm just going to do something really super quick. Okay. So we hit save. That's going to be part of my book now. So now I can just go back to export book to PDF, but can't talk. Make sure we don't have interactive selected. And then we're going to say Rev 1 or revision 1. So if you do this, if you use this revision numbering system in your file name, whatever the highest number is, you know that's the latest version. Don't put final whatever, because final, that's confusing. Revision 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it just makes it really easy for everybody who's working on a project to know what the latest version of your file is. So do yourself a favor. Every time you publish a work in progress, same thing. Just update the latest revision number. So export. Okay. So there was my first edit to the document. Upload revision 1 to Google Drive. So now it's nice and clear. I'd like, okay, that's the same document, but revision 1. Otherwise, you're sort of relying on the date and time and whatever, and that's not always the best way to do it, especially as you get lots and lots of work in progress. I try and keep my concept development folder kind of clean, like after we get up to like revision 20 or 30, I'm not going to keep every PDF there. I don't necessarily want to delete them. Sometimes you want to go back and take a look at the comment history and stuff like that, but just make a folder called previous revisions or whatever, just so that your working folder is really clear. Anybody who's on your project can know, okay, I'm not hunting around, I'm not trying to guess what your final version, most current version of your file is. It's just the latest revision number. And I can go through and do something like this and say, okay, that's great. Say, nice start, needs more finesse. It's like literally my favorite feedback from a client is needs more finesse. Could you be more specific with finesse? Yes, you could be. That's a bad comment. But anyways, as an example, there you go. That's what we use our commenting tool for. You can actually then reply to it and have like a little discussion or a chat. Much more efficient than email, right? And again, trust me, as you get into doing publication work, a whole bunch of feedback emails with attachments and stuff like that, that all belongs back in 2010. We don't work that way anymore. So we really want to be using an immediate feedback tool like this. Adobe Creative Cloud does sort of have a version of this, but of course it requires everybody's got access to a Creative Cloud account, which in publishing, a lot of people don't. A lot of, authors, photographers, all kinds of people, they don't. So Google Drive, anyone can access. You can access it on your phone, which of course a lot of people want to do. I've got people comment on things while they're out in the field or whatever. So this is why we use it. And so it's really, really handy. So I'd like you to really use this. So that's pretty much it. That's what I'm going to want you to do for session 1. Get your InDesign book done, publish out to a PDF, upload it, structure your file this way, have a content planning folder with a Google Doc in it that's got your publication plan. Try and get that done for, I'd say, about 3 o'clock. That should give you, this video ended up being about an hour long, so that should give you about an hour to work on that, and then we'll take a little break, and I'll go through each of your proposals, give you some feedback on what I think, how I think your brief is. Is it a brief that I could work with to develop a concept, understand what you're doing? Give you your feedback and get you underway on this project. Overall, for this course, the way that I like to do it is I like to push for week 10 to have your finished magazine done. That gives you 2 full weeks to refine it, polish it. Talk to your instructor about that one. I think it's entirely reasonable to get a pretty viable style guide magazine masthead cover design and everything. To get that done in 10 course sessions, that's 40 hours. That's a regular work week. That is really reasonable. As long as you really use the 4 hours of each of your course sessions, you should be able to be pretty much done with your publication by week 10. That'll just give you a nice relaxed 2 weeks, which you're going to want near the end of the semester to really fine tune those details. So that's what I would recommend timing wise, but that'll be driven by your instructor. So hopefully this is really helpful. Again, I'm going to be available for a good solid 2 hours to answer questions and feedback in Microsoft Teams. Like I say, I literally don't know if I can guarantee that I'll be out of my doctor's appointment on time. So I really don't want you guys hanging. And this should cover everything. It's essentially how I would introduce this course to anybody. And look forward to chatting to all of you tomorrow afternoon.